Marketing is toxic. Well, done the wrong way, you can end up in a situation where your marketing hurts more than it helps. And in today's video, I'm going to walk you through how you can go about your marketing in a more conscious way. How are regular folks like you and I that aren't blessed with massive marketing budgets supposed to compete in spaces that take a ton of money, a ton of time, and a ton of resources, all while trying to stay sane? That's the question. And on this podcast, we're here to help you find answers. Welcome to the Marketing Stuff Podcast. All right, so let's get into the fourth session of the free online marketing course. Today, we're going to be talking about conscious marketing. If you don't know who I am, I'm Maurice A. Davis. I am your host of the Marketing Stuff Podcast, and this is your opportunity to learn the basics and the foundation of marketing absolutely free. So let's get into it. Our learning objectives today is define conscious marketing, describe what constitutes marketing's greater purpose, differentiate between conscious marketing and corporate responsibility, describe the ways in which conscious marketing helps various stakeholders, explain how conscious leadership can produce a conscious culture, right? Describe how ethics constitutes an integral part of a firm's conscious marketing strategy, and then identify the 4 steps in ethical decision-making. That's a lot. But I promise you it's not nearly as bad as it sounds. So let's get into this. Before we jump into what is conscious marketing, I actually have to take you to another concept called the triple bottom line. And the triple bottom line focuses on people, profits, and planet. And when we talk about having a triple bottom line, what we're saying is we want to make sure that the business is operating in a way that it considers all of these aspects before it makes a decision. Okay? This is probably the key theme that centers inside this idea of conscious marketing. So just understand people, profits, and planets. And if you've been following along and you went through section 1, do not confuse these with the 4 P's of marketing. They are not talking about the same thing. So just understand that these are slightly different, right? This idea of profits and people, that overlap that can happen when you're looking at the different P's, 4 or 7, they're not the same. Don't do it to yourself. Okay, so what is conscious marketing? It's approach to marketing that acknowledges the 4 key principles: a higher purpose, stakeholders, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. Okay. So what is conscious marketing, or the 4 key principles? Was the recognition of marketing's greater purpose. It's the realization that business has to function with a purpose more than just making money. And so anytime you hear somebody talking about we're conscious and we care and our marketing is about being conscious, what they're saying is we do more than just money. Now, we have to be careful here because there is something called being social responsible. That is not the same thing as conscious marketing, and we will get into that, right? So an organization can be social responsible and not be conscious, but most organizations that are social responsible will be conscious, and we're going to share that when we get down further in the learning objectives. Then we have the consideration of stakeholders and their interdependence, okay? So when you have someone that is a conscious marketer or have a conscious culture, then they're thinking about the interdependence of business, the stakeholders or people that they serve, how that impacts the vendors, understanding that they're all interrelated. You have the presence of conscious leadership and intentionally crafting a corporate culture. The reason why, and I have to put quotes around the intentionality piece, is because we have to understand that regardless of if a leadership is being intentional or not, you're going to be building a culture with or without your conscious thoughts. Okay. So here, when it's talking about how a conscious leadership can create a corporate culture, we have to realize that it has to be intentional, right? Then finally, when we get down to number 4, understanding that decisions are ethically based. Now, in just a second, we're going to talk about ethics, and I'm going to show an example of I struggle with this piece only because we have to understand that as leaders and as marketers, when we talk about decisions being ethically made, that everyone does not come from the same ethical foundation. And a lot of that doesn't have anything to do with things being right or wrong. It has to do with our cultural understanding and our life experiences. Now, what this is getting at is that the assumption that we all have the same understanding of what is ethical. But this is so important to highlight, because if you go into a scenario in marketing and in business and assume that everyone has the same ethical foundation, you will make a lot of false assumptions. So what is business ethics? Well, it refers to a branch of ethical study that examines ethical rules and principles within a commercial context. What is marketing ethics? Well, it's ethical practice that is specific to the marketing domain, right? Selling products, how we communicate, where we get our products from, how those products impact the environment, right? Those pieces. is not so much as concerned about the financial practices, but it is concerned about maybe how our advertising can impact the vendors that we work with, right? Okay, learning objective 2, describe what constitutes marketing greater purpose. Now, this right here is my assessment. So you have to figure out what marketing's greater purpose is to you. But for me, it is to connect people, drive change in our culture, behavior, and beliefs. Okay. Now, where do I get this from? Well, when we look at the impact that marketing has, we see that there are advertisements that have made changes to the way that we interact with the world. And if that isn't the true objective of marketing, right, is to get you to make a change, to do something different, then I don't know what it is. Okay. I'm pausing here because I want you to understand that you have to come to your own conclusion here of what you think marketing's greater purpose is. So let's scroll down. I included this. Check this video out. This is from Constant Contact. I really thought Kim Jones, her story, or Kim Jones-Sneed, her story was pretty fantastic, and how she went about building a business focusing on the greater purpose of marketing. So I will include the link for the show in the show notes. Go check her out. And the folks over at Constant Contact, I thought the show was fantastic. So what is corporate social responsibility? Well, it refers to the voluntary actions taken by a company to address ethical, social, and environmental impacts of its business operation and the concerns of its stakeholders. Okay, what does that actually mean? So let's talk about how corporate social responsibility and conscious marketing differs. And we're actually going to skip down here. Recognize that business is a subset of society and that society is a subset of the planet. Remember at the top, we talked about that conscious marketing identifies or looks at the interrelation of how our business, planet, people, and profits, how they're interrelated. This is probably the biggest difference to me between the two. Because if you recognize their interrelation, you more than likely respond differently to some choices that you make. Whereas on the flip side, social responsibility sees limited overlap between business and society and between the business and the planet. And these two, to me, have the greatest difference between if you are conscious or if you are socially responsible. Now, there are some deeper aspects. If you're in the business of disposing of chemical waste, more than likely you will not reach conscious because your business inherently has some negative impacts and you can't undo them, right? They're a part of how you do business. Another one would be if you sell cigarettes or alcohol. We know that these have some negative impacts on the people that consume them. And so more than likely, if you were talking about it, you probably wouldn't reach the level of conscious just with the definition of how we look at conscious marketing. However, you can be highly socially responsible. Okay. So that's one of the key main differences. The other is that often social responsibility is tacked on to an existing marketing framework or an existing marketing company or firm, whereas conscious marketing is embedded into the business, into the department, into the firm. Hey, Maurice here. Different Maurice than from the show that you're watching right now. If you want access to all the resources that I'm talking about and you don't want to have to write them down, in the notes below, you'll find a link. If you register there, I have included all the resources that I talk about inside of this free database. It's yours. So get back to the show. I hope you enjoy. One is we got to meet this measure. Here are the activities we can do to meet this measure. The other is everything we do resonates with this objective. Okay. All right. So describe the ways in which conscious marketing helps various stakeholders. So we have our employees, our customers, marketplace, society. And then finally, when you kind of combine them all, you come up with the environment. Now, the truth is that when we're starting to look at how the marketing impacts these different sections, number one, you're going to have to look at the business as a whole, but you think about it like our employees, we have to make sure that the organization is making enough money to be able to pay our employees, right? But not only just pay them, but make sure they have the benefits that they need and make sure that the messages that we're communicating externally, that we live internally. For our customers, we need to make sure that what we're providing them actually helps them, serves them, exceeds their expectation in the marketplace. We want to make sure that the whole industry can be forced to follow suit because what we're doing is just so good. Society as a broader whole can demand that companies act more responsibly, right? So these are all things that can have an impact on our choices as companies, but also as how our company can have an impact on these portions of society, the environment, customers, employees. Okay. And then the environment is just a unique category again, where you bring them all together and you say, this is everything. And later on, we'll get into how to do a pestle analysis, and you'll see this term environment again. And it just means the collective of anything that can have an impact on the business or the industry. Okay. Now, learning objective number 4, explain how conscious leadership can produce a conscious culture, right? So when we're looking at like how we can go about this, we want to break them down into the 3 key components. We talked about this in an earlier section. We're talking about planning, implementation, control, when we were building out like the elements of a marketing plan. I believe that was video 2. So go back to video 2 or 3. I'm not 100% sure.
No, that's funny. That's funny.
We're trucking along. I'll reference the correct video hopefully in the show notes, because I don't remember exactly which one it is. But when we have this, what we're talking about is in the planning phase, marketers have to embed the conscious nature inside vision, the mission, and the values of the company. Remember, when I was talking about it up here, right, the difference between the two was that conscious marketing is embedded through the entirety of the business. And this is how we do that, right? We start off and say, when we're building the values, when we're building the mission of the business, we say, this is what we're looking to do. Why conscious and social responsible are so different. Social responsible, I don't have to embed this in the planning, right? I can skip that and go straight into implementation. When for implementation pieces, for a conscious culture, we look at how, and we got to look at the 3 Ps. This is why I was saying, don't let it confuse you. When we look at the marketing mix, we then have to ask ourselves how each one of the components of the marketing mix impacts one of the 3 components of the triple bottom line, and then make our choices accordingly using our ethical decision-making, which we'll talk about later on, and decide if that is the correct choice for us as the company. Okay. And then in control, we have to have systems in place to monitor the impact of the 3 Ps, triple bottom line, but those systems also need to be agile enough to change as the segment of control changes. Because in control, we're talking about typically social issues or issues that are highly dynamic, our control systems have to be extremely flexible. Okay. So this is what a leader has to do. We have to look at the planning, the implementation, the control, and build a plan or embed consciousness into those segments. If we don't, then we're not being conscious, right? We may just be being socially responsible. Okay. All right. So describe how ethics constitutes an integral part of a firm's conscious marketing. When a business embraces conscious marketing using marketing ethics, it becomes an essential component of their development strategy. Business will implement social responsible programming and use other systems to reduce the likelihood of team members making unethical choices. So what does that mean? Before that, this is what I was talking about before. Based on how I read the book, it discusses ethics as a universal understanding of right versus wrong. This is what I was saying before. Don't expect that people come from the same ethical basis. And in the next video, section 5, we'll actually get into some of the components that make this so dynamic. And I'll just share with you a little bit that culture can be a huge, and not company, personal culture can be a huge change of what is ethically right or wrong. So we have to pause here and just respect the differences of someone's ethical foundation and understand that as leadership, when we start talking about up here planning, we also have to create plans and designs that say, in the context of our business, what is ethical? What does it look like to make an ethical decision? And again, in the learning objective 7, we'll kind of talk about some of those elements and questions that you can ask yourself in order to design that system and say, this is what it looks like to be ethical here. Okay, so I just included 2 different ethical theories to kind of outline the differences, right? At the end of the day, one ethical theory, utilitarianism, essentially says that anything that results in the overall happiness is okay. And I'm going to say this wrong. Deontological ethics, if you're here and you're like, that's not how you say that, Maurice, go for it. Help me out. Help a brother out.
Help me out.
Argues that some actions are morally required or forbidden, irrespective of their outcome. And so the scenario that we can look at is like, if lying to you or lying to the group means that less people will panic, it means that in that panic, You know, if I told you the truth, a lot of people get hurt. But if I lied to you, no one would get hurt. Utilitarianism would say it's okay to lie because the lie results in the greatest good. The other, however, would say it's not okay to lie because it's never okay to lie, regardless of the outcome. Now, this is not to say either one is right or wrong. And if I have any ethics majors that are listening to this and like, well, that's not absolutely true, hey, feel free to correct me in the comments, right? I don't profess to be an ethics major. I've taken quite a few ethics classes. This is my best understanding of the two different theories, okay? So as a business leader, we need to clarify the expectations in our culture. And essentially what we're saying is, in this scenario, what is the correct course of action inside of our agency? Do you have a way of communicating that if telling the truth is going to hurt everyone, I want you to withhold the truth? And that's a pretty heavy burden to bear, but it is something that you have to do as a business leader. Okay, learning to 7, identify the 4 steps. So we have to identify the issue, collect the information, brainstorm and evaluate alternatives, and then choose a course of action. Now, when we're talking about ethical decisions, how we can kind of come to the end here, when we're like, okay, I need to choose a course of action, some things that we can do to do a quick evaluation of if like we're choosing the correct course of action is like, ask yourselves these 5 questions. How would I feel if, or I saw this on the front of a local newspaper for me, right? If somebody blasted my stuff on a local newspaper, would a person that I admire most encourage this activity? Can I explain my action clearly and include an honest account of my motives, right? Can I tell you why I did it and be truthful? Would I be able to look myself in the mirror and respect what I see? Okay. And then would I want to be on the receiving end of this action or consequences? Okay. So these are kind of the 5 questions. I've also included some questions down at the bottom if you want to kind of flex your ethical muscles.
Where'd my muscles go?
And ask yourself some more existential marketing questions. Those are included in the document. If you have not grabbed it already, go over to mauriceadavis.com/vault and get access to these notes and the notes for the next video. But outside of that, stay out here winning.